Hello, everyone, and welcome to LearnEng, the podcast that helps you speak English more naturally and confidently. I'm Emma, your host.
And I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we talk about real problems English learners face and share simple ideas that can help you improve your English step by step.
Whether you're learning English for school, work, travel, or everyday conversations, this podcast is here to support your learning journey.
So relax, listen carefully, and let's improve your English together. Picture the scene. You are standing in the middle of a room at a gathering.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. It could be maybe an industry networking event where you're trying to make professional inroads.
The absolute worst.
Or perhaps a friend's birthday party where you only know the host and they've immediately abandoned you to go check on the catering.
Just let you entirely defend for yourself.
Exactly. Or, maybe it's just a mundane, everyday chance encounter in the office break room. You're just waiting for the coffee machine to finish brewing.
Just staring at the drip.
Yeah. And you make eye contact. You've offered that polite, totally socially acceptable smile. You've successfully navigated the initial obligatory greeting.
The script.
The script, exactly. You ask them how they're doing, and they politely inquired how you are doing in return. The exchange of pleasantries was totally flawless.
Textbook.
And then the conversational well just suddenly, inexplicably, runs entirely dry.
It just drops off a cliff.
It really does. The dreaded, awkward silence descends upon the space between you like this heavy, suffocating blanket. Suddenly, your senses just heighten in all the wrong ways.
Oh, you become hyper-aware of everything.
Yes. You can hear the low, mechanical hum of the refrigerator in the corner. You can literally hear the blood rushing in your own ears.
It's deafening.
And you're desperately, frantically searching the archives of your brain for a single, solitary, relevant word to say. But the filing cabinets of your mind have just been wiped completely clean.
Just empty folders everywhere.
In that endless 5-second void, you really just want the floorboards to open up and swallow you whole. It is a visceral, almost painful experience. And it's something every single person listening right now has endured. So welcome to our deep dives, where today we are going completely under the hood of that exact universally terrifying moment.
It is a moment of profound psychological vulnerability. That sudden drop in conversational momentum, it isn't just a minor social hiccup. It's a really fascinating phenomenon that transcends culture, age, and professional background. Because when the words stop, we are left entirely exposed.
We really are.
Yeah.
And to figure out exactly how to navigate that exposure, we're looking at a rather unexpected but exceptionally insightful source today.
I was really surprised by this, actually.
I was too. We are unpacking a series of excerpts from a language learning audio program called The Art of Sustaining English Conversations. Specifically, we are diving deep into a segment from the LearnEng audio program, which is hosted by a duo named Emma and Ryan.
Which, from a sociological standpoint, is a brilliant angle to take.
How so?
Well, their target demographic is explicitly individuals who are learning English as a second, third, or maybe even fourth language.
Right.
However, the mechanics that Emma and Ryan are breaking down within this curriculum, the actual foundational nuts and bolts of how human beings keep a cooperative dialogue alive, they're entirely universal. They're teaching language, sure, but what they're really deconstructing is the architecture of human connection.
The actual blueprint. So the mission of this deep dive is to isolate and deconstruct Emma and Ryan's step-by-step framework for overcoming these exact conversational roadblocks.
Exactly.
We're going to take these highly practical tools designed originally for English learners, and we are going to extract the underlying psychological insights. Because what you'll quickly realize is that their observations regarding vulnerability, cognitive load, and interpersonal communication, well, they are deeply applicable to you, regardless of what language you happen to be speaking natively.
100%.
Whether you are trying to build rapport with a difficult client, establish common ground with a new neighbor, or simply survive a tense holiday dinner with extended family.
Which requires a lot of tools.
It really does. But the architecture of the solution remains the exact same.
To accurately analyze their methodology, we first really need to understand the environment they create for their audience. The way they establish the tone of their curriculum reveals a tremendous amount about the psychological barriers inherent in communication.
I agree completely. Let's actually bring their voices directly into the room to see how they frame this. We have the exact word-for-word introduction from our source material today, straight from Emma and Ryan. I'll read Emma's parts, and you take Ryan's.
Sounds good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to LearnEng, the podcast where we help you speak English more naturally and confidently. I'm Emma, your host.
And I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we talk about common problems English learners face and share simple tips that help you improve your speaking step by step.
Whether you're learning English for school, work, travel, or everyday conversations, this podcast is here to support your journey.
All right, Ryan, let's start today's topic.
Yes. Today we're talking about how to continue conversation in English.
Okay, so that's how they open.
What's fascinating here is the immediate, almost surgical construction of psychological safety within those first few seconds of dialogue.
Right, they don't waste any time.
They don't. Notice how Emma explicitly states right out of the gate that they are going to discuss common problems.
Common problems, not unique failures.
Exactly. This isn't just a throwaway welcome line. It is a highly calculated framing mechanism. She is instantly normalizing the struggle. Because for a language learner, or frankly for any one of us navigating a bout of social anxiety, the most paralyzing fear is the internal belief that we are the only ones failing.
Oh, absolutely. We convince ourselves that everyone else received this secret manual on how to socialize fluidly, and we're somehow uniquely defective in our ability to connect.
Precisely. By explicitly labeling the roadblock as a common problem, and then framing their forthcoming solutions as simple tips delivered in a step-by-step manner, Emma and Ryan systematically dismantle the listener's performance anxiety before the actual lesson even commences.
It effectively lowers the stakes.
It does.
It is an acknowledgement that the barrier isn't a lack of intelligence or social worth. It is simply a mechanical issue that requires a mechanical solution. And the first step in their map is defining the exact nature of the problem.
Which they do very clearly.
Emma points out a really intriguing phenomenon right at the start of their lesson. She notes that the vast majority of learners actually have absolutely no issues starting a conversation.
The start is easy.
Yeah, they have thoroughly mastered the initial greeting, the hello, the how are you doing today, the nice weather we're having.
The launch sequence is flawless. It's establishing a stable orbit where the catastrophic failure occurs.
That's a great way to put it.
This brings us to a concept we might define as the illusion of the easy start. We really need to dissect why those initial moments feel so effortless.
Because they really do feel effortless. You don't even think about it.
Exactly. Standard greetings, asking about someone's day, commenting on the immediate environment. These are not spontaneous acts of creative communication. They are highly regimented, culturally ingrained procedural scripts. We've run these specific neural pathways thousands upon thousands of times through sheer repetition.
Muscle memory.
Complete muscle memory. Consequently, executing them requires virtually zero cognitive load. You can easily utter the phrase, "I'm doing well, thank you, how are things with you?" while your brain is simultaneously trying to remember if you locked your car door or calculating what time you need to leave to beat traffic.
You're operating entirely on autopilot.
Entirely.
But the autopilot has a very limited range, and this is where we hit the wall. Ryan observes that after this initial exchange, and I'm quoting him directly here, the conversation suddenly stops.
The script runs out.
The pre-written script simply runs out. But let me push back on that a bit. If we are highly intelligent, capable adults, why does it stop so abruptly? Why can't the brain just effortlessly generate a new script on the fly? When we look at the mechanics of this awkward silence, what is actually malfunctioning in the transition from the greeting to the main dialogue?
That transition represents a massive shift in cognitive demand. You are moving from procedural memory reciting a known script to declarative, spontaneous generation.
Oh,
And you are forced to do this under the immediate pressure of social observation.
which is terrifying.
It is. When the script ends, the true test of real-time processing begins. Now, for the specific audience Emma and Ryan are addressing, the English learner, the barrier is highly tangible. They are literally hitting a wall regarding vocabulary acquisition or grammatical structuring. They simply might not possess the English words to articulate their next complex thought.
Right, it's a structural barrier.
But for you, operating within your native language, the barrier is entirely psychological, yet equally paralyzing. As that silence stretches out from 1 second to 3 seconds, a localized stress response is triggered. Your awareness shifts from the external environment entirely to your internal state.
Right, you enter this intense, almost deafening internal monologue of panic. Ryan captures the essence of this perfectly when he says people immediately start thinking, what should I say next?
Yes.
When you really stop to examine that moment, the immense cognitive pressure is staggering. For the language learner, they are frantically attempting to translate abstract concepts from their native tongue into English, conjugate irregular verbs correctly, and monitor their pronunciation, all while a stranger is staring at them.
It's a lot to juggle.
But even stripped of the bilingual challenge, if you are speaking your native language, the acute panic embedded in that question, what should I say next? It acts as a massive disruptor. It feels less like a conversational lull and more like a sudden fight or flight response.
That is exactly the right framework to view it through. It is devastating to the conversational flow because it forces your attention entirely inward. Authentic, sustainable communication fundamentally requires external focus.
You have to be paying attention to the other person.
It demands that you are actively listening to the semantic meaning of what the other person is saying, while simultaneously reading their microexpressions, processing their tone, and interpreting their body language. But the absolute second you begin panicking, when your internal monologue is screaming, "What do I say next? Am I being boring? Are they judging me for this silence?"
You have essentially abandoned the interaction.
You're not even in the room anymore.
You're no longer present with the other human being. You're trapped inside the echo chamber of your own performance anxiety. The flow dies not because you lack things to say, but because one of the participants has mentally left the room to frantically rummage through their internal archives for a clever lifeline. Okay, let's unpack this. Because Emma and Ryan do not simply diagnose the panic and leave us stranded there. They immediately pivot to offering a structural lifeline. And their first major solution to bypass this internal panic is conceptually simple, yet structurally vital: asking follow-up questions.
It functions as the ultimate pressure release valve for conversational cognitive load.
Let's rigorously deconstruct the specific scenario they provide to illustrate this. Emma offers a highly standard hypothetical where someone says to you, "I'm studying computer science."
Very common statement.
Right. Now, Ryan points out the absolute worst possible way to handle this offering, the ultimate dead end. He explicitly warns against responding with a simple, "Oh, okay."
The conversation killer.
If we look past the obvious lack of enthusiasm, what is actually happening on a social level when someone drops an "oh, okay" into the dialogue?
The phrase, "oh, okay," is the quintessential conversational stop sign. To understand why it is so damaging, we have to look at conversational momentum as an exchange of energy and burden.
I like that. Energy and burden.
When a person offers a piece of personal data, like, "I'm studying computer science," they are tossing a ball into your court. They are providing material. When you respond with, "oh, okay," you are taking that offered energy, letting it drop to the floor and stepping away.
Ouch.
You have provided absolutely zero new information, you have demonstrated a complete absence of curiosity, and most critically, you have taken the heavy burden of topic generation and shoved it aggressively back onto their shoulders. You are forcing them to independently invent another brand new topic to pitch to you, hoping you might actually engage with the next one.
It creates a tremendous amount of social fatigue for the other person. If you think about the emotional subtext of being on the receiving end of an "oh, okay," it feels incredibly dismissive. It is exactly like playing a game of catch, where your partner just lets the ball hit their chest and roll away every single time. Eventually, out of sheer exhaustion or feeling unvalued, the other person is going to stop throwing the ball. They will politely excuse themselves to go get a drink and never return. But Emma and Ryan contrast this dead-end behavior with specific conversational drivers. Instead of the flatline, "oh, okay," they suggest responding with, "what made you choose that subject?" or "do you enjoy studying it?"
The structural elegance of those specific follow-up questions operates on multiple levels. On a purely mechanical, utilitarian level, as Ryan accurately points out, they show interest and keep the conversation alive by demanding a substantive response.
It forces them to keep talking.
But on a deeper psychological level, they alter the interpersonal dynamics entirely. When you ask a targeted follow-up question regarding a piece of information they volunteered, you are sending a powerful implicit signal. You're saying, "I heard what you offered, I recognize its value to you, and I am actively inviting you to expand on it." It is profoundly validating.
And crucially, it gives you, the anxious participant, an immediate reprieve. This is the hidden utility of the follow-up question. Think about the mechanics of time in a conversation. When you ask, "what made you choose that subject?" you have just successfully purchased yourself anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 solid minutes of conversational rest.
It's a brilliant tactical move.
You have completely passed the spotlight back over to them. In that window, you get to exhale, let your shoulders drop from your ears, and transition out of that inward-focused panic about what to perform next. You can finally return to being externally focused and simply listen to the narrative they are providing.
Precisely. You are utilizing a structural tool to force a psychological shift. You are moving from a high-anxiety performance mindset to a low-anxiety curiosity mindset. Furthermore, you are leaning into a fundamental human truth. People, as a general rule, enjoy discussing their own experiences, their motivations, and their passions.
We all love talking about ourselves.
We do. Asking a question like, "What made you choose that?" explicitly invites a narrative response rather than a data-driven response. It shifts the interaction from cold facts, "I am enrolled in a computer science program," to personal storytelling. Well, ever since I was young, I was fascinated by taking apart old gaming consoles, and I wanted to understand how the logic boards worked.
It gives them the floor to tell a story.
You are facilitating a transition from surface-level data exchange to the sharing of underlying motivations and feelings, which is the actual bedrock of authentic human connection.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, and where Emma and Ryan show a deep understanding of social nuance. You cannot simply rely on asking questions indefinitely. While a follow-up question is a great immediate lifeline, relying on it exclusively creates a totally different type of awkwardness.
It really does.
This brings us directly to Emma's next core technique, which is the principle of reciprocity. She firmly states that conversations should go both ways and advises the listener to actively share something about their own experiences. But let me play the skeptic for a moment here.
Go for it.
If the primary goal, especially when I'm nervous, is to keep the other person talking so I don't have to carry the burden, isn't interrupting to talk about myself a bit counterproductive or perhaps even selfish?
That is a very common misconception, and it is exactly why Emma's rule of reciprocity is so crucial. If we connect this to the bigger picture of social power dynamics, a conversation constructed entirely upon an asymmetry of information exchange, meaning one person does nothing but ask probing questions, while the other person does nothing but supply answers, it rapidly mutates.
Mutates into what?
It stops feeling like a friendly, cooperative chat and begins to feel distinctly like an interrogation.
Yes. It creates a severe imbalance. It feels like a job interview. Or worse, a deposition. You are just firing off questions. Where do you work? Do you enjoy the culture there? How long have you lived in the city? What do you do on the weekends?
Rapid fire.
Initially, the other person might be flattered by the attention, but very quickly they begin to feel cornered. They start subconsciously wondering why you are extracting all of this personal data from them while keeping your own cards completely hidden against your chest.
Because vulnerability, by its very nature, demands mutual exchange to feel safe. If I am offering you pieces of my personal history, my preferences, and my vulnerabilities, and you are simply nodding, offering nothing of yourself, and demanding more information, a profound imbalance of power and intimacy is generated. The speaker begins to feel exposed.
It's a one-way mirror.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is why Emma's advice to interject and share your own experience isn't selfish at all. It is actually an act of conversational generosity. It is a necessary structural element to make the interaction feel, in her exact words, more natural. You have to put your own chips on the table.
Let's analyze the specific travel scenario they got down in the source text to see how this reciprocity works in practice. Emma outlines a situation where someone mentions that they enjoy traveling. She advises that your response shouldn't merely be another extraction question like, "Oh, where's the last place you went?"
Which is the instinct for a lot of people.
It is. Instead, you must offer a shared connection first. You start by validating, "That's interesting. I also enjoy traveling." And then Ryan adds the absolutely critical personal detail to complete the maneuver. He says, "My favorite trip was to the mountains last year."
That specific addition, "My favorite trip was to the mountains last year," is a conversational masterstroke, despite its apparent simplicity. Let's thoroughly analyze the mechanics of what that one sentence achieves. First, it explicitly validates their initial offering by establishing common ground. You are signaling, we share a behavioral trait.
Right. We both like to travel.
But secondly, and vastly more importantly for the longevity of the interaction, by volunteering that specific noun, the mountains, you are essentially serving a new ball over the net for them to hit.
You are providing them with raw material. You are giving them a hook.
Exactly. You have now empowered the other person to seamlessly take on the role of the questioner. They don't have to invent a topic, you just handed them one. They can easily respond with, "Oh, which mountain range did you visit?" Or, "Are you a big hiker?" Or, "Do you prefer to just relax in a cabin?" Or even draw a contrast. "I actually prefer the beach. What is it that draws you to the mountains?"
It naturally flips the roles.
By volunteering a personal detail, you are actively initiating a reciprocity loop. You ask, they answer and expand. You validate and share a detail. They ask a follow-up about your detail. You answer. This cyclical exchange of energy and vulnerability is the exact rhythm of a sustainable organic connection. It prevents the interaction from stalling out or turning into a one-sided interview.
It completely distributes the cognitive load. You are building the bridge from both sides simultaneously, which takes the immense pressure off of any single individual to carry the entire interaction.
It's true teamwork.
It really is. And speaking of the structural components of building that bridge, I want to transition into what might be the most granular yet arguably the most practical part of Emma and Ryan's entire framework. They introduce the concept of what we might call the lubricants of language.
The micro-interactions.
Yes, Ryan specifically highlights the absolute necessity of utilizing small phrases to continue talking.
These micro-interactions are frequently overlooked, yet they are absolutely vital to the structural integrity of any dialogue. We tend to conceptualize conversations only in terms of the macro blocks of information we're exchanging, the stories we tell, the opinions we debate, the facts we convey.
The big stuff.
We focus heavily on the bricks. But a wall made only of bricks with no mortar will inevitably collapse under its own weight. These simple connecting phrases act as the essential mortar. They hold the larger blocks of information together and provide flexibility to the structure.
Okay, let's unpack this and really get granular. Let's analyze the specific arsenal of phrases they provide because their utility is brilliant in its simplicity. Emma and Ryan equip their learners with 4 distinct phrases.
4 very specific tools.
The first is Emma's suggestion. That's interesting. The second is Ryan's offering. Really? Tell me more. Emma then introduces, that sounds fun, and Ryan concludes the list with, I've heard about that. On the surface, these seem like throwaway filler words.
Just fluff.
Right. But let's look at the underlying psychological function each of these serves in a live interaction. Let's start with Emma's baseline phrase. That's interesting.
That's interesting. Serves as the fundamental baseline of acknowledgement and intellectual validation. When an individual is speaking, particularly if they are taking a risk by sharing something slightly vulnerable, niche, or highly specific to their own life, their most prominent subconscious fear is that they are boring you.
We're all terrified of being boring.
They are constantly scanning your face for signs of disinterest. When you utilize a micro-interaction to explicitly state, that is interesting, you are providing instantaneous positive reinforcement. You are sending a direct signal to their brain's reward center. Yes, your offering is valuable. You have my attention. Please continue. It serves as a necessary reassurance to keep them actively engaged in the process of sharing.
That makes perfect sense. Now let's look at Ryan's suggestion. Really, tell me more. When I hear that, it feels like it operates on a totally different frequency than just saying something is interesting. What is the actual psychological function of using a phrase like that?
It operates on a different frequency because it functions as an explicit, undeniable invitation. The word really, when delivered with genuine intonation, demonstrates a sense of surprise and heightened emotional engagement. It gives the speaker a small rush of dopamine because they feel they have successfully captivated their audience.
It's very validating.
And the imperative command, tell me more, serves as the ultimate green light. In many social situations, people possess an inherent hesitation about monopolizing the airtime. They don't want to be perceived as talking too much about themselves. By explicitly commanding them to tell you more, you completely absolve them of that guilt. You have officially and enthusiastically granted them the floor. It is a profound demonstration of curiosity that encourages deep elaboration.
It clears the runway for them to really get into their story without feeling self-conscious. Moving down the list, we have Emma's phrase, that sounds fun, which again seems to serve distinct purpose separate from intellectual interest or curiosity.
It is entirely distinct. That sounds fun. It is primarily an act of emotional mirroring and affective empathy. You are moving beyond merely intellectually processing the semantic meaning of their words. You are attempting to actively inhabit their emotional state.
Empathy in action.
If a person is animatedly discussing a hobby they are deeply passionate about, responding with an intellectual, that's interesting, can sometimes feel a bit cold or clinical. However, responding with, that sounds fun, aligns your emotional frequency directly with theirs. You are validating the feeling behind the action, rather than just the action itself.
Yeah.
This type of emotional mirroring builds interpersonal warmth and rapport significantly faster than simple logical agreement.
It shows you are feeling it with them, not just analyzing it. And finally, we have Ryan's concluding phrase. I've heard about that.
That specific phrase is a highly effective tool for establishing immediate common ground, even in situations where you severely lack deep expertise on the subject at hand. Imagine someone mentions a relatively obscure nonfiction book they're reading, or a highly technical software program they use at work, or a new restaurant concept that just opened across town.
Stuff you might know absolutely nothing about.
Exactly. If you simply stare blankly, it highlights the divide in your shared knowledge. But if you deploy the phrase, "I've heard about that," you instantaneously shrink the social distance between you. You are signaling, we occupy the same broader cultural ecosystem, we have shared touchstones. Even if you immediately follow that phrase with a caveat like, "But I actually don't know much about how it works, could you explain it to me?" That crucial initial connection, that baseline of shared reality, has already been firmly secured.
So what does this all mean for the overall flow of the interaction? Emma asserts confidently that utilizing these small expressions makes conversations feel smooth. And looking at the mechanics, I completely understand her assertion. These micro interactions act as the ultimate conversational shock absorbers.
That's a great analogy, shock absorbers.
They completely eradicate that terrifying, echoing silence we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive. If the other person finishes a complex thought, and your brain requires a solid 3 or 4 seconds to process what they said and formulate a coherent response, you don't have to just stand there wide-eyed staring at them in awkward silence.
You don't have to freeze.
You deploy one of these lubricants, you nod and say, "Oh, wow, that is really interesting." And while those phonetic sounds are leaving your mouth on autopilot, your brain is actively buying precious milliseconds to formulate your actual substantive response.
They lubricate the gears of the interaction, preventing the machinery from grinding to a halt. They signal active, engaged listening without requiring you to immediately launch into a well-crafted monologue of your own. They are incredibly forgiving, highly utilitarian tools that drastically reduce the cognitive friction of real-time communication.
But let's look at the worst-case scenario. What happens when even those highly effective tools aren't enough? What happens when your anxiety spikes so high or the person you are speaking with is giving you such incredibly brief, closed-off answers that your mind just goes entirely, completely blank?
Total systems failure.
Total failure. You have no follow-up question. You have no personal anecdote to share. Emma and Ryan have constructed a contingency plan for this exact moment of failure. It is the pivot strategy. Ryan explicitly advises his listeners, if you don't know what to say next, talk about common topics.
This introduces the concept of the safe harbor. In the chaotic, unpredictable ocean of human interaction, when the conversational seas get excessively rough, or when you completely lose your navigational bearings, you must strategically retreat to known, easily navigable shallow waters to regroup.
And they provide a very specific map to these waters. They give us what we could call the Big Five. Emma and Ryan specifically list these 5 common topics: school, work, hobbies, movies, and travel. Now, I want to thoroughly analyze why these specific areas are the absolute gold standard for getting unstuck. Why, as Ryan plainly states, are these particular subjects easy for most people to discuss?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human sociology and cultural architecture, these 5 specific topics aren't random. They represent the absolute largest overlapping Venn diagrams of modern human experience.
The universal commonalities.
Let's break them down systematically. School and work represent the universal structural obligations of contemporary society. Almost every single person you interact with has navigated some form of an educational system, with all its inherent stresses and triumphs. Similarly, the vast majority of adults are engaged in some form of labor or professional pursuit.
It's the shared human grind.
These topics offer an immediate, almost guaranteed shared baseline of reality. You can instantaneously bond over the universal shared struggles of navigating a complex bureaucracy, dealing with a difficult superior, managing a confusing curriculum, or simply enduring a frustrating commute.
It is intensely relatable. Even if you work in entirely different industries, the feeling of being stressed about an impending deadline is identical, regardless of whether that deadline involves submitting a graduate term paper or delivering a quarterly financial report. It is a shared emotional language based on structural obligation. And then you transition to hobbies. Emma and Ryan suggest pivoting to hobbies, which feels very different than asking about work. Why are hobbies such a reliable safe harbor when the conversation stalls?
Because shifting the conversational pivot toward hobbies leverages a completely different psychological driver: intrinsic motivation. As we just discussed, we participate in work and formal schooling primarily because we have to. They are structural obligations tied to survival and societal advancement. Conversely, we pursue hobbies purely because we want to.
It's entirely voluntary.
When you ask an individual about how they spend their free time or what their hobbies are, You are actively inviting them to discuss their sources of joy. This simple pivot instantaneously alters the energetic frequency of the entire interaction.
Yeah.
People physically light up when they are granted permission to talk about what they genuinely love, whether that passion is cultivating a complex garden, knitting intricate patterns, or spending weekends restoring vintage cars. You bypass the stress of obligation and tap directly into their enthusiasm.
That makes a lot of sense. You're changing the emotional climate of the chat. And then we look at the final two in their big five, movies and travel. These feel distinct from the others. They lean much more heavily into the realm of escapism.
Precisely. Let's look at movies, which broadly encompasses television, literature, and general pop culture. These mediums serve as shared cultural narratives. The brilliant utility of discussing a movie is that it provides a third-party, external object for both of you to analyze, critique, and discuss.
It takes the heat off the individuals.
It completely removes the intense pressure of having to talk directly about yourselves or your own deep-seated beliefs. You can vigorously, passionately debate the thematic ending of a popular science fiction film without ever having to reveal any deep personal vulnerabilities or deeply held political ideologies. It creates a highly engaging yet incredibly safe space for intellectual sparring and connection.
It's low stakes. You can disagree about a plot point without it feeling like a personal attack. And how does travel fit into this framework?
Travel is uniquely powerful because it seamlessly combines the narrative potential of discussing a hobby with the safe escapism of discussing a movie. It allows individuals to share curated stories of adventure, humorous mishaps, or profound relaxation. What makes all five of these topics, school, work, hobbies, movies, and travel, so incredibly functional as safe harbors is their inherent cultural neutrality.
They don't step on any landmines.
They rely on highly accessible vocabulary, which is obviously paramount for Emma and Ryan's audience of language learners. But more importantly, for anyone navigating a social interaction, these topics reliably spark connection and sustain dialogue without ever crossing the treacherous borders into the dangerous, highly polarizing territories of politics, religion, or controversial current events. They allow you to safely test the waters of a new interpersonal dynamic, ensure you can build rapport without risking an immediate, catastrophic misunderstanding.
It is a brilliantly constructed safety net that protects both parties. But as we transition into the final, and frankly what I believe to be the most profound and philosophically rich portion of Emma and Ryan's lesson, we encounter a roadblock that isn't about vocabulary or topic selection at all. It is entirely internal. Emma makes a crucial observation. She notes that many learners stop speaking because they worry about grammar mistakes.
This identifies the ultimate, most insidious mindset hurdle in all of communication. This is the paralysis of perfectionism.
It is an absolute tragedy when you truly think about the implications. Consider how many endlessly fascinating personal stories, how many side-splitting jokes, how many brilliant, innovative insights have simply never been shared with the world, strictly because the person holding that thought was terrified they might conjugate a verb incorrectly, use the wrong preposition, or stumble slightly over their pronunciation.
It's a massive loss of human connection.
And this absolutely applies to native speakers, too. We constantly censor ourselves because we are afraid of not sounding articulate enough or smart enough or witty enough for the room we are standing in.
This brings us directly to Emma's core thesis, which is undeniably the most important, paradigm-shifting takeaway of this entire analysis. She states her philosophy with absolute, uncompromising clarity. The goal is communication. Grasping this requires a massive, fundamental reframing of how modern society conditions us to view language and interaction.
How so?
From a very young age, within strict academic settings, we are relentlessly taught that language is a rigid test that must be passed. We are constantly graded and evaluated on our precise syntax, our flawless spelling, and our strict adherence to often arbitrary, archaic grammatical rules. We deeply internalize this toxic idea that if a sentence is not structurally and grammatically perfect, the thought it contains is inherently invalid and unworthy of being spoken. We gamify human connection and turn it into a high-stakes academic performance.
But the messy, beautiful reality of actual human interaction operates on a completely different set of rules. Ryan swoops in with this incredibly liberating reassurance for his listeners. He explicitly tells them that conversations don't need perfect grammar, and he emphasizes that simple sentences are completely okay.
He is drawing a vital, necessary distinction between the act of performance and the act of genuine connection. The reality of everyday dialogue is incredibly forgiving of structural errors, fragmented sentences, and awkward pauses, provided that the underlying meaning and intent are successfully conveyed. If you are hopelessly lost navigating a foreign city and in a state of panic, you manage to approach a local and simply blurt out, "Train station where?" Using terrible pronunciation, zero transitional phrases, and no active verbs, the listener on the street isn't going to pull out a red pen, grade your utterance, and turn their back on you.
They aren't going to fail you.
They are going to understand your distress, decode your core meaning, and point you in the direction of the train station. The fundamental goal of communication, the transfer of vital information from one mind to another, has been successfully achieved despite the total absence of grammatical perfection.
Yes. The listener on the other end of your conversation, 99% of the time, is desperately looking for the exact same things you are. A moment of connection, a shared sense of humanity, and to understand your meaning. They're not standing there acting as a walking, breathing grammar checker, maliciously waiting for you to end a sentence with a preposition so they can judge you. When we finally grant ourselves permission to let go of the exhausting need to sound impossibly eloquent, perfectly polished, and flawlessly articulate at all times, we actually open the door to being truly genuine. We stop performing a character, and we start actually authentically talking to the person standing in front of us.
It is a profoundly liberating realization. When you deeply accept Ryan's premise that simple sentences and imperfect grammar are completely okay, you instantaneously remove the massive, crushing cognitive load we discussed at the very beginning of this hour. You stop frantically translating, agonizingly editing, and harshly censoring every single thought before it is allowed to leave your mouth. You finally allow the conversation to simply flow naturally, embracing the imperfections, the stumbles, and the simplicity. And frankly, those very stumbles and imperfections are often exactly what make you appear more endearing, authentic, and relatable to the person you are speaking with. Flawless perfection is inherently intimidating and often creates distance. Vulnerability, particularly linguistic and expressive vulnerability, is deeply inviting. It signals to the other person that they are allowed to be imperfect around you too.
This has been such a remarkably profound look into the hidden mechanics of how we connect as social creatures. Emma and Ryan have essentially delivered a masterclass in human social survival, brilliantly disguised as a standard English lesson.
They really have.
Let's take a moment to rigorously summarize the specific, actionable toolkit we've extracted from this source material today. When you inevitably find yourself staring down the barrel of that dreaded, heavy, awkward silence, remember these sequential steps. First, deploy the lifeline. Ask targeted follow-up questions to pass the spotlight, offload your cognitive burden, and demonstrate genuine curiosity.
Keep the ball in their court.
Second, establish the two-way street. Share your own specific experiences and details to create a sustainable loop of reciprocity and avoid the interrogation dynamic. Third, utilize the lubricants of language. Rely on those simple micro-connecting phrases, the "really," "tell me more," and the "that's interesting," to bridge the gaps, validate the speaker, and buy your brain crucial processing time. Fourth, if total panic sets in and you completely blank, deploy the pivot. Retreat immediately to the universally safe harbors of common topics: school, work, hobbies, movies, and travel.
The big five.
And finally, above all else, violently let go of the paralyzing grip of perfectionism. A simple, fractured, genuine attempt at communication will absolutely beat a flawlessly executed, terrified silence every single time. Simply put, do not be afraid to open your mouth and speak.
It is a remarkably robust, highly actionable framework that treats the anxious conversationalist with deep empathy while providing highly practical, structural support to navigate the complexities of human interaction.
Absolutely. It takes the mystery out of the magic. And to bring this entire analysis full circle and to truly honor the specific source material that provided us with these incredible insights into human behavior today, we are going to conclude our deep dive the exact same way Emma and Ryan conclude theirs. I'll read Emma again.
I'll take Ryan.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Learning.
We hope today's discussion helps you feel more confident continuing conversations in English.
Remember, speaking English improves with practice.
The more you talk, the more natural it will become.
Thanks for listening to Learning.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
It's just a perfectly structured sign-off.
As we officially close the book on our own deep dive into the material today, synthesizing everything we have unpacked regarding vulnerability, cognitive load, and the mechanics of connection, this raises a highly important question. It's something I want you to actively mull over the very next time you find yourself interacting with someone, whether it's a stranger at a networking event or your partner across the dinner table. If these foundational rules designed explicitly for mastering a secondary language, the radical, liberating ideas of letting go of academic perfection, demonstrating genuine, uncomplicated interest in the narrative of the other person, and focusing intensely on simple, shared human connection over complex performance are so undeniably universally effective. Isn't it entirely possible, perhaps even probable, that we have been massively, tragically overcomplicating how we communicate in our native languages every single day of our lives?
Yeah.
Wow. That is definitely a paradigm shift worth thinking about. We build these massive intellectual walls when a simple bridge would do just fine. Until next time, take a breath, let go of the perfect script, and just keep the conversation going.